The U.S. is grappling with the global microchip shortage, and at the center of the crisis, Taiwan, home to the world's biggest chip maker. China's debt-trapped real estate developer is back in the spotlight. Evergrande's chairman sold his shares to save the company, while another shareholder sold to save himself. Beijing takes new action in its clampdown on Chinese internet giants. This time, it's targeting China's version of Facebook. The Chinese Communist Party is covering up again. Photos and videos about Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai were made public outside China, but in China, they are censored. A Seattle man returns home after being held hostage in China for 4 years. Alongside his return, the U.S. released 7 prisoners back to China. And in the waters surrounding Taiwan and Japan, 5 countries are holding a joint military drill. They are looking to counter Beijing's aggression there. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Nations around the world are struggling as the global microchip shortage persists. And the United States is stuck in the middle. On one hand, it's looking to boost domestic chip making. On the other, it's strengthening ties with Taiwan, home to the world's biggest chip manufacturer. Here's more.
Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC, is the world's largest contract microchip maker. It's responsible for producing almost all of the world's most sophisticated chips, as well as many less advanced versions. These chips keep computers, cars, and smartphones around the world running. Because its tech is so widespread, any interference in TSMC's production process can spell major trouble for the U.S. and other nations. Many see the company as a kind of bridge connecting the safety of Taiwan and safety of the American supply chain. And that's exactly what's happening now. Talks between the U.S. and Taiwan earlier this week focused on the globe's worsening chip shortage. The event was dubbed the Second U.S.-Taiwan Economic Prosperity Partnership Dialogue. It marks the latest U.S. effort to strengthen economic ties with the chip-making powerhouse. There, U.S. Undersecretary of State Jose Fernandez and Taiwan's Economy Minister Wang Meihua discussed how to ease chip shortages and respond to what they called China's economic coercion. That comment came in response to recent remarks from Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping, warning that U.S.-based Taiwan supporters were, quote, playing with fire. China's communist regime has never ruled Taiwan, but has long claimed the island as its own territory. Beijing has repeatedly hinted at taking over Taiwan by force. At the meeting, Wang said Taiwan and the U.S. are aiming for a long-term goal. For decades, Asian countries have replaced the U.S. as the world's top chip manufacturers. But the trend may be shifting. TSMC is now building a $12 billion plant to ramp up production in the U.S., while Korean giant Samsung is set to build a factory in Texas to the tune of $17 billion. It remains to be seen how the U.S. will balance its relationship with Taiwan and its efforts to boost domestic chip making.
Outside the tech industry, the U.S. is fostering its relations with Taiwan in other areas, too. 5 U.S. Congress members arrived in Taiwan on Thursday. Talks between them and Taiwan officials are expected to focus on security matters. Their short visit marks the second time in a month that American lawmakers have visited the island. Prior to arriving in Taiwan, the 5 politicians had made stops in Japan and South Korea. Good and bad news for debt-trapped real estate company Evergrande. 2 big shareholders are selling their shares. One is aiming to save the company, and the other is trying to keep a distance from it. On Thursday, founder and chairman of Evergrande, Hua Kai-yen, sold a large amount of his shares, raising over $300 million for his company. The share sale reduced Hua's stake in Evergrande by about 10%, but he is still the biggest shareholder. Evergrande reported over $300 billion in liabilities, and it has been selling assets to make payments. And Chinese authorities told Hui to help pay bondholders with his personal assets. The company's shares have fallen over 83% from last year. A real estate company in Hong Kong, Chinese Estates Holdings Limited, announced Wednesday that it would sell all of its Evergrande shares. That's over 700 million shares. It's estimated to be worth less than $300 million, as Evergrande shares already fell by more than 80%. The Hong Kong company will suffer a loss about $1.3 billion. Chinese authorities are also trying to reduce the crisis. A government body took over an Evergrande soccer stadium under construction. It would be the world's largest soccer venue if it were to be completed by the end of 2022 as originally planned. Beijing's clampdown on the technology sector now has a new target, WeChat. This messaging app is the most popular social media platform in China, with more than 1 billion active monthly users worldwide. It's called the Facebook of China.
The clampdown on WeChat takes a different form than it's taken for other Chinese technology giants. This time, the Chinese Communist Party ordered at least 9 state-run companies to restrict their employees' use of the app. And the reason? They were citing security concerns about data. Most state-run companies in China are large-scale. These 9 companies include some of the biggest. Among them, China National Petroleum had more than 1 million employees. China Mobile has 447,000. And China Construction Bank about 350,000. Employees at these companies were told to close or delete work-related chat groups due to sensitive information they may contain. The journal also reported that Chinese app stores got a notice from the country's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. The Wednesday notice says WeChat parent company Tencent could only update its apps or launch new apps with government approval. This is not the first time Tencent has been caught in Beijing's clampdown. As an online video gaming giant, Tencent was hit hard by the new strict restrictions on online gaming time. And in summer, Chinese regulators blocked Tencent's effort to merge 2 major game streaming sites. Since last year, the impact of internet giants on society is triggering increasingly more alarm from Beijing. WeChat users can not only chat with each other on the platform, as with Facebook, but also do many other things, such as paying bills and hailing taxis. The authorities also use its popularity to carry out certain services, like contact tracing. This is part of their so-called health code system, in this app installed on citizens' mobile phones. The same is true for citizens' vaccination records. Companies such as Tencent now have hold of an unimaginably large amount of data, and they are in the way of the communist regime, seeking to solely control such information.
To boycott the Beijing Winter Olympics or not? More countries are considering the question now, 10 weeks ahead of the opening ceremony. That includes the U.S., Canada, the U.K., and Australia. They cite human rights violations in China and the unfolding events involving China's tennis star Peng Shuai, who accused a Chinese high-ranking official of sexual assault. And Lithuania joined the list this week. The small European country is seeking to coordinate with the U.S. and the European Union on a boycott. Its sports minister already said on Thursday she will not attend the games. And what, in their minds, is a diplomatic boycott? It means diplomats wouldn't go, but athletes would. This seems to be a light version of not sending athletes to the games. However, it would still have an effect. German sports policy expert Jürgen Mittag told German broadcaster Deutsche Welle that the absence of a large number of country heads would damage the Olympics, and Beijing wouldn't achieve what it hoped for, a good image. He added other countries will think carefully about the boycott because China is a global power and could retaliate in other ways. Now we look to Beijing's hostage diplomacy. A Seattle resident finally returned home after being held hostage in China for 4 years. The man's name is Daniel Xu. He says he found out he could leave China 4 days before Biden's meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. While Beijing allowed Xu to come back to America, the U.S. also released 7 prisoners back to China. These prisoners include a former Chinese bank executive who's on Beijing's wanted list and 2 women who were arrested after they entered Trump's mansion in Mar-a-Lago in 2019. Another 2 prisoners were convicted of taking photos of a naval air station in Florida, and another 2 committed financial crimes in Utah. As for the Seattle man, Daniel Xu, he didn't commit any crime. Beijing held him hostage because it wants his father to return to China. Chinese authorities say his father embezzled over $60,000. Xu's father denies the charge. It's been days since Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai has resurfaced. Before that, she was out of the public eye for 2 weeks after she alleged on social media that a prominent Chinese official had sexually assaulted her. But as the world continues to wonder just what is happening with the three-time Olympian, China is working hard to keep coverage of the story out of its news within its borders. Will Ripley has more.
When China's communist rulers don't like the message,
this broadcast is not being aired in China. It's being censored.
They silence the messenger. They have an army of censors waiting to push that button.
They don't want the people there to see it.
CNN coverage of tennis star Peng Shuai blocked inside China.
It really tries to control the story, control the narrative.
Controlling the narrative means scrubbing social media. Peng's explosive post on November 2nd, accusing a retired Chinese leader of sexual assault, erased within 30 minutes. Look for the story on China's leading search engine. You get this message. Sorry, no relevant results found. The scandal, so politically sensitive, a high-profile state propagandist referred to it on Twitter as the thing people talked about. Inside China, state media staying silent. No mention in the mainland's TV or digital media. Outside, those news outlets eagerly tweeting updates and images of Peng in English on a platform blocked in their own country. An irony not lost on millions following the story outside China, some even mocking the state media tweets. Peng is seen smiling, but not talking, at a tennis tournament, having dinner with friends, and a Chinese sports official who just so happens to mention the exact date several times. CNN has no way to independently verify these videos or this email, supposedly from Peng, to the head of the Women's Tennis Association last week, claiming everything is fine. A computer cursor visible in this apparent screenshot. The head of the WTA telling out front he's not convinced.
I'm just struggling to agree to that and don't believe that's the truth at all.
The WTA demanding direct, uncensored communication with Peng. The organization's repeated calls and messages to the tennis star unanswered.
China is well known for coercing statements to show that everything is fine.
China's narrative bolstered by the International Olympic Committee. The IOC handed out this single image of a video call Sunday, along with a statement summarizing the call, claiming Peng is safe and well, totally ignoring her painfully detailed allegation of sexual assault. With billions of dollars in ad revenue on the line, critics call the IOC complicit in China's apparent silencing of a three-time Olympian, who many fear is being held under duress, censored by China's authoritarian government, which blames hostile forces for politicizing the issue. When CNN goes to the next story, our signal returns. As China waits for the news cycle to move on, the pressure keeps growing. The world keeps demanding answers.
A Chinese human rights lawyer traveled to Shanghai to get the U.S. counsel to help his client. But right after he got off the train, he found himself surrounded by a group of unidentified people. NTD's Juliet Song has more.
A Chinese human rights lawyer was briefly detained after he tried to seek help from the U.S. consulate in Shanghai. Xie Yang had been reaching out to help his client, who's being held in a Chinese jail as her health quickly deteriorates. His client's name is Zhang Zhan. She's a citizen journalist who went to Wuhan to report on the pandemic. Authorities later detained her and sentenced her to 4 years in jail over her reporting. Zhang has since taken up a hunger strike in jail, and her health is getting worse.
According to multiple reports citing her relatives' comments, Ms. Zhang is near death.
In a Twitter post earlier this week, Zhang's lawyer Xie Yang said he was going to talk to the U.S. consul in Shanghai about Zhang's situation. He also tagged a train ticket in his post. In a later tweet, Xie says he was detained by a group of unidentified people after he got off the train in Shanghai. Authorities held him for a short time before sending him back to his hometown, accompanied by police officers.
Beijing is limiting a citizen's personal freedom, and limiting someone's freedom like that is a human rights violation.
Xie has encountered similar experiences before. Earlier this month, he tried to visit Shanghai to meet with Zhang Zhan's family, but authorities stopped him in the name of pandemic prevention measures. Juliet Song, NTD News.
The United Nations is urging China to free citizen journalist Zhang Zhan. The organization is making the call on humanitarian grounds. They are calling on China to make urgent life-saving medical care available to her. 2 new CCP virus cases are raising alarm in Hong Kong. The cases are caused by a new variant of the virus, first detected in South Africa. The World Health Organization says the new variant is highly transmissible, and researchers are now trying to find out if this variant is vaccine resistant. One of the men infected with the virus just came back from Africa. Hong Kong quickly tightened its border control. Starting Saturday, non-residents who have been to certain states in southern Africa are banned from entering the city. Britain and the European Union states also imposed stricter border controls in response to the new variant. The South China Sea isn't the only body of water China's disputing territorially. The East China Sea also has its share of controversy. And to counter the communist regime's military threat, 5 countries are conducting drills in the region.
5 nations are conducting joint Navy drills in waters close to Taiwan and Japan. Navies from the U.S., Japan, Canada, Australia, and Germany are engaging in various types of drills in the East China Sea and the Philippine Sea, including air and anti-submarine warfare operations. For the first time ever, the German Navy joined these drills, and Germany also recently increased its presence in the Indo-Pacific region. Earlier this year, the German Navy announced a regular deployment to the region. And next year, Germany says it will send fighters, tankers, and transport aircraft to the region as well. On Thursday, Japan's self-defense forces and the U.S. Marines conducted a joint exercise in Tanegashima Island in southwest Japan. It aimed to strengthen their capabilities in combat on land, sea, and air, as well as coordination between allies. This to counter Beijing's assertiveness around the disputed islands Senkaku or Diaoyu in the East China Sea. In the area around the Strait of Malacca, a maritime training activity is underway. Earlier this week, Malaysia and the U.S. kicked off 8 days of training. That area connects the South China Sea to the Indian Ocean, and it's one of the most important shipping lanes in the world.
Now we look to Japan, one of the United States' most important allies in East Asia. Japan is getting more actively involved with its allies and neighbors in trade and military operations. Their efforts have one thing in common: countering the growing threats from communist China.
The U.S. is building stronger ties with Japan to counter China's influence. The U.S., the European Union, and Japan have agreed to renew a trilateral partnership. The alliance will address challenges from other countries' non-market policies. The announcement comes days after U.S. President Joe Biden met virtually with Chinese Communist leader Xi Jinping. There was no specific mention of countries with non-market policies. But Bloomberg cites U.S. officials as saying the Biden administration clearly has concern about China's non-market economic practices. To counter this threat, Japan is one of the U.S.'s most important allies in Asia. Japan is a democracy, and it's one of the most technologically advanced nations in Asia. It's also the largest economy in the region, and the 3rd worldwide. After China and the U.S., Japan has a gross domestic product, or GDP, of over $5 trillion. Japan's population is close to 40% of that of the United States, even though it looks much smaller on a map. In response to China's increased military presence in the Asia-Pacific region, Japan increased its national defense budget to new highs. Outlet Nikkei Asia says the country just approved over $6 billion in additional funding for defense. Japanese officials told the Wall Street Journal the money will be used to defend the island chain from southern Japan to Taiwan. After being defeated in World War II, Japan has limited its military budget within 1% of the country's GDP. Though the limit was removed in late 1980s, its impact still exists. But amid concerns about China's military presence in the East China Sea, Japan's ruling party made a pledge to double its defense spending. Japan will use those funds to build an indigenous stealth fighter and missiles able to travel over 500 miles. The rest of the money will go towards strengthening its cyber, space, and electromagnetic warfare capabilities. Since October, Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force joined several drills in the South China Sea and in waters close to Japan and Taiwan. The drills were operated by the U.S. and other democratic countries, seeking to demonstrate their presence in the region. Safety conditions in the region are directly tied to Japan's territorial dispute with China. According to Japanese media, 4 Chinese Coast Guard ships entered waters around the Senkaku Islands earlier this month. In response, Japan's top government spokesman accused China of violating international law, adding that Japan cannot accept it. The Senkaku Islands are a group of islands in the East China Sea. China knows them as the Diaoyu Islands instead, and Beijing insists they're part of Chinese territory. But Japan controls the area and denies Beijing's claim to them. Despite the tensions and the communist regime's propaganda campaigns against Japan, the two nations' close geography ensures close economic ties between them. Data shows China has become Japan's #1 export buyer, having consumed more than 20% of Japanese exports last year. It's the first time China has passed the U.S. to become Japan's top export consumer.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.